Welcome ILEAD USA. Welcome all our state partners. It is day 2. Hopefully you're all terribly exhausted and well fed at the same time. A combination of sugar, caffeine, and technology is an explosive one, and we hope you're taking advantage of it. So we're going to continue with our shared comments and shared keynotes in bringing sort of the best of the world to all of us. And so today we have the honor of being joined by a regular contributor throughout ILEAD USA's history, Eli Neiburger, who's the Deputy Director of the Arbor District Library. Eli fits beautifully into the ethos that we have begun introducing to you over the past several days, very much looking at a healthy future for libraries and librarianship, but not simply in maintaining what we've always done, but looking at what we can do best. I admit to being a great fan of Eli, and some of my best ideas have been stolen from Eli, so just consider this a big citation for all the good ideas I ever had came from Eli Neiburger and Joe Janes. So I will not stand up here and give you a lot of more history because I would much rather hear from him than hear from me about him. So will you please welcome Eli Neiburger.
Good afternoon, people of ILEAD. How's it going? I blew out the mic already. That's great. So we're going to talk today about dimensions, all right? And we're going to use for this talk a wonderful book which is called FLATLAND. It was written in 1884 by A. Square. And the reason that he penned this under A. Square was because if you took the message he was trying to say, which was very much about the landed gentry and the aristocracy and all that kind of thing, if you took it literally, it would be very heretical. He would get in a lot of trouble. So we use this pen name. But his actual name was Edwin A. Abbott. Confusingly, the A also stood for Abbott. His name is Edwin Abbott Abbott. So A Square is also a very direct pseudonym for him. So he put himself in his book. A Square is a character in this book. And now, to make this a little, we're going to just make one small change to A Square to make him a little bit more comfortable and adaptable to the library business. So what happens in the book is A Square lives in Flatland, a two-dimensional universe, okay? This is A Square's house. Now, because, of course, this was written in 1884, there's a lot of stuff about caste and servants and all that kind of stuff. And one of the central ideas in Flatland is that when polygons reproduce, their offspring have one more side than they do. So A Square's sons are pentagons. A Square's grandsons are hexagons. His servant class are triangles. And the more isosceles the triangle, the more pointy the triangle, the lower class. So you can see, we know now from Downton Abbey, we understand this stuff. The scullion is a very pointy triangle. The footman is a slightly less pointy triangle. The butler is such a broad triangle, he's almost a square. Maybe he will give birth to a square. We'll see how that goes. Now, here's where it gets a little dicey and a little 1884 about things. Women are lines, and they're very dangerous. And some of the things in the book are, now, it's not entirely clear if he wrote it this way, trying to comment on the way that his society treated women, or if it what he was actually believed. But he did die a bachelor, so take that as it will. So in the book, because everything happens in a flat 2D plane, it's very easy for us as 3D creatures to conceive of this 2D plane. We're looking down on it from above, right? But when you're inside it, all you see is a line around you, right? You're inside the plane. You can't perceive the third dimension. You don't know it exists. And one of the things about this, and the device he uses to make anything make sense, is that their land is very foggy. So the further away something is, the lighter it is. Now, one of the things is because women are just lines, when they come up close to you, if they approach you directly, you can't see them at all, which is partially what makes them dangerous in his eyes. So one of the rules of their land is that women have to waggle back and forth when they move so that you can see them. Now, again, who knows for sure where he was coming from on this? But in the story, A Square has a dream. And his first dream is he dreams about a land of no dimensions, point land, where there is not length or width. There's just a point. And the point is all there is. And the point is the king and the subjects and the servants and the men and the women and everything. It is just one point. It's like the pre-Big Bang universe, everything condensed into a single ultra-dense point. Of course, this point thinks very highly of itself. It also thinks very lowly of itself. It is the only self in that universe. Then he dreams about visiting Line Land, a land of one dimension, where there's only length. And in that land, the king is in the middle, and the king's eyes can see only the men that are closest to him, further away the boys and then the women. And the only way they even know each other exists is by hearing each other yelling. So there's this whole sideline about how they have to yell and how important that is for the functioning order of their society that they scream. But he's a square. He's outside the one dimension. He is a higher order being. He can see this from two dimensions, right? So he's able to see the king's universe in a way that the king himself cannot ever see it. Then he wakes up. He wakes up back in his room, and he realizes, and he says, well, that was amazing. I'm so glad I live here in the real world, in 2D space, where everything makes sense. Then something else happens. What appears to be a circle, and of course in Flatland, the circles are, because the more generations you've reproduced, the more sides you have. The circles are the highest caste, the royalties, the clergy, the highest, most valuable members of society. So first he thinks that a circle has appeared, but then the circle shrinks away again. And he has no idea what just happened, because this never happens, something to appear and then disappear. And what he ultimately realizes is he's just been visited by a sphere. A sphere has passed through Flatland, and he has seen the two-dimensional cross-section rise and then fall and then disappear as a higher order being passes through his limited reality, and he's able then to perceive. Then what happens is the sphere picks up Mr. A Square and takes him far away, far above. He travels into the third dimension, something he never knew had existed before. And he has an epiphany. He sees his entire world in a glimpse, a way that he had never been able to see before. And he realizes some truths about his world. For example, that these higher order beings can see through them. When they come to visit Flatland, they can see inside their houses because they are above them looking down. So of course, what does A Square ask? He says, well, so what's the fourth dimension like? You guys have traveled, you brought me out of the second and go to the third, so who came to you and took you out of the third dimension into the fourth? And what does the sphere say? Oh, well, that doesn't exist. Sorry, my reality is the highest reality. Yours is a lower one. There are no realities higher than mine. Okay, now this is a bit of a parable. I'm going to connect this to libraries, don't worry. So how does this apply in the library land? And let's look at it through sort of ages of libraries up through this point, because the biggest challenge that we have as people who work at libraries is not the restrictions that are placed upon us, but those which we place upon ourselves, right? It is so important to be able to not just think outside the line or think outside the box, think outside the cube, right? What's the next step beyond that? So let's look at this through different ages of libraries. So in fundamental libraries, the land of no dimensions, it was point land. There were no decisions to be made. There were no axes along which to evaluate. If a book existed, you needed to have it for your library, period. Point, right? Just put everything inside. That was the entire mission of libraries. And every library sought to accumulate as much of the world's knowledge as it possibly could, right? From the Sumerians through the German Saxony libraries, their goals were to acquire as much knowledge as they could and save it all for the scholars. Let us never, as library people, forget that libraries are an inherently elitist institution. It was not founded for the people. Even Andrew Carnegie didn't found them for the people, because he said, and I quote, "If I had given them better wages, they would have wasted it on finer clothes and better cuts of meat." So he was deciding for them how their money should be spent. And that's, that's slightly problematic, just a little patriarchy there. So that's no dimensions. Just put everything in there. Save it all for the scholars. So what if you look at a one-dimensional library? Now we have one axis along which to evaluate what goes in the library. It's very easy to figure out what that axis is. At one end you have crap. At the other end you have not crap, right? Everything in the world falls somewhere on this spectrum. Your library wants to be toward the not crap end of the spectrum, right? We don't want to have too much toward the crap end of the spectrum. And this basically is post-Gutenberg libraries, right? Because what did Gutenberg do? He basically created the book business. Prior to that, they were works of art. They were bespoke, single handmade objects. Gutenberg enabled the industrialization of books. And what was the scholars' reaction to this? It's the end of all knowledge. We'll never be able to read all the books again. The university is doomed. Academia, just toss in your pointy hat and go home, right? This is what people said when books started to become prolific. But what that meant for libraries is we had to start making decisions. We had to start deciding what we had in our libraries. So then Gutenberg and a few other people kicked off the Industrial Revolution. Before you knew it, books weren't just rapid mass-produced objects. They were commodities. They were things that were everywhere, that were all over the place, and the prices fell fast. So here at this point, introduce another dimension for libraries, two axes of evaluation. We, of course, have the existing crap, not crap axis. Then we add a demand axis. Everybody wants some, and nobody wants any, right? So now you have a two-dimensional possibility space for libraries. Things that are good and things that are not good, things that are in demand and things that are not in demand. Clearly, you want to keep your library in the top 3/4 of that. You want to avoid that bottom quarter of things that are not good that nobody wants, right? But this gave libraries a guiding principle of if it's not crap and somebody wants it, then we should put it in the box. Put it in the box, put it on the shelf, put it on the library. This was a very easy way to assess things, provided you had an accurate picture of demand, which is tricky. We'll come back to that. So then, in the equivalent of FLATLAND, we draw out a third dimension of libraries. And this really is what you would call post-internet libraries, okay? Because the internet made it possible for information to move without cost, essentially. Okay, the cost of moving information has collapsed to nothing. The cost of storing information has virtually collapsed to nothing. And what that means is we have the plane down there at the bottom, right? This is what we learned about, the crap want plane. All right? At the bottom of this box are things, that's where libraries used to be. We only had to evaluate things on this. Now that everything that we had is now available online, or almost everything, and in many cases, especially with the more popular stuff, remember and never forget that the only thing standing between your patrons and the things that they want from their library and getting them for free immediately is the amount of time they're willing to invest looking for them. Every single commercially produced item you have in your library that's recently produced is available somewhere online for free. Not legally, but fortunately, and I say fortunately because I do believe this for libraries, fortunately, the efforts of the content industries have guaranteed that millennials don't care about the content industry's rights, right? They care about the convenience. And if it's the reason that they're buying music at all is because it's easier, right? So this is a problem for libraries. So what is that third dimension? What's the third dimension for libraries? I think it's uniqueness, okay? Something you can't get anywhere else. And this is the problem for libraries because we get trapped at the bottom of this cube, right? We're eagerly and intensely evaluating the crapness and the demand of all these items, but we're not thinking at all about whether or not we're providing unique value to our communities, things they can't get anywhere else, right? 50 Shades you can get a million places. It's all over the place. It's at the checkout line at the grocery store. It's at 7-Eleven. It's at the drugstore. It's flying through our heads right now, right? It's ubiquitous. For libraries to laboriously provide access to ubiquitous content is the very definition of a fool's errand. So we can't be trapped down there at the bottom of the cube. We need to elevate the plane of crap want by making it things that you're evaluating its crap and its want, but you know that it's unique, things that people can't get anywhere else. That's so critical. So it gives you this rule. If it's not crap and someone wants it and they can't get it anywhere else, well, then you should be giving it some space, right? So now, many of our institutions are years away from this point, right? We're going to be stuck at the bottom of that cube for a very long time. But looking at things from this perspective. Am I providing unique value to my community? Whether it's a public library community, a campus community, a school community, all those things. Am I providing unique value is a critical question for libraries. Because what's next? What's the fourth dimension? What's hyperland? What's the next step for libraries? And this is what we're going to talk about today. Because for A Square has just had this transformative experience. She knows that there must be more. There must be another way, even beyond this dimension that she's just been introduced to, that's still mind-boggling and hard to understand. There must be another one, because if you just had this experience, there must be another one going up the line. Whereas the sphere, and we'll come back to the sphere and what he means to libraries, the sphere will insist there is no fourth dimension. This is the highest order reality that exists. So, what is the fourth dimension for libraries? If the first dimension is the crap axis, the second dimension is the want axis, and the third dimension is the uniqueness axis, what's the fourth dimension for libraries? Well, it's not technology. And part of the reason it's not technology is because libraries have been technology businesses since day one, right? From the start, we're using the best technologies that were available. Books are technology, cuneiform is technology, LPs and wax cylinders are certainly technology. And this is a digression I don't have time for today, but just real quick, wouldn't it be great if we had all held on to our LP collections? They would be so hot right now. Libraries would be so hip if we hadn't thrown that stuff away in the 80s, right? We are actually establishing at our library a new vinyl collection. And we're like, oh man, it's fragile. Well, I tell you, the difference between an LP and a DVD is that if an LP gets scratched, you can still listen to it. That's a pretty big deal. Anyway, digression I promised I wouldn't make. So, I think the fourth dimension is love. This is the transformative thing that adds value to library services in all directions and is its own self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Is that all you need to do at your library to be successful and to move into new areas is to do things that people love. Not that they need, not even that they want, but that they'll love. And part of the challenge is they don't know what they love necessarily. They know what they like, they know what they want, they know what they need. But love is a hard thing. And part of the reason, the challenge is, and this is a bit of what is sometimes called the faster horse problem. If you start your project at a library by asking the public what they want, you've already failed. All right? It's not that you can't be informed by what they want, but if you guide your organization solely by public demand, well, I got a comment card once. It says, I think the library should offer prostitutes and pie. I'm sure that people would love both those services, right? Neither of which is a good fit for a public library or a community college library or a school library for that matter. So in any of these cases, it's important for you to use your discretion, but you need to try things because you think that people might love them. And that doesn't get informed by taking a survey. It doesn't get informed by posting one of those things where people vote online. God, please don't make your decisions based on online polls. Okay? It is like literally the opposite of statistical relevance. So, but being on the desk and hearing from users every day, all the time, is how you get a sense of what they love. You can't get that in a survey because you're not going to reach all the people who use the library. So, if the fourth dimension is love, and they had it pretty close, right? The fifth element is love, well, the fourth dimension is love. Okay, whatever. Now, here's something that's really weird about the fourth dimension. We're going to use this. This is a tesseract, all right? And despite what Marvel says, it actually is a real mathematical object. It's a hypercube, four-dimensional cube. A cube is a very easily understood object to three-dimensional beings. A tesseract is a very hard to understand object because when you spin it in 3 dimensions, you can't tell what it is. One of the things about dimensionality is you can always represent in a dimension lower what it looks like for a dimension higher. For example, we as 3-dimensional beings have no problems understanding a 3D object when rendered in 2D space, right? Any drawing of a 3D object, our brains can put that together, no problem, right? But as 3D beings, even though you can make a 3D representation of a 4D object, our brains struggle at it. And here's an example. This is what a tesseract looks like spinning in 3D space. Okay? Our brains go, hell no. This makes no sense. All right? So this is a four-dimensional solid. So basically, we are only seeing the part of it that sticks out into our 3D space. All right? Another way of looking at it, and this is the standard mathematical way of looking at it, is this is a tesseract turning on its fourth dimensional axis. Looks like it's turning inside out, right? That's the best our brains can come to understanding it. But this object is not changing its shape. It's just our understanding of it can only see so much. All right, with me so far? Okay, so let's look at this specifically through a number of things that libraries do. First, let's start with collections. Okay, in Pointland, it was really easy. Get all the things, right? Who cares if you make a completely unusable collection? Just get all the things. And if you look at this and go, maybe you should find a new job, right? This is failure. This is a failure state, okay? This is not good. Just because libraries need to be distinguishable from hoarding, right? Okay, a sufficiently advanced library is distinguishable from hoarding, right? So, so in Pointland, it made sense, just get all the stuff. But then once there started being more stuff than libraries could actually handle, then we transitioned into having an axis upon which we can evaluate it, which meant only get the good stuff, right? The problem is, good is subjective. It's highly subjective. And what's good for you may not be good for your patrons. And many of us as libraries, that's the main struggle we have, no matter what kind of library you have, is how do I reconcile what they want with what we want them to want, right? The crap axis. And you can wind up with really beautiful, boutique, lovely little collections that have some very subjective decisions in them. Like, for example, this person made a painting of their 7 favorite books, and 3 of them are in the 200s. And from 200 to 299, if you know what I'm saying, right? Nobody does, right? Yeah. 200's religion, 200 to 299, Christianity. All right, you are with me. Okay, so this gives you a problem, all right? Yeah. You can't go wrong picking on Dewey. Kick him while he's down. So in Lineland, you can make decisions, and you have to make decisions, but you might make the wrong one. That's the challenge. Now, when you move to Flatland and you start considering whether there's demand for these objects, you now have, the standard 4-pane scenario stuff, right? In the bottom right, you have things that are good but that aren't in a lot of demand. Daniel Handler's Adverbs is a great example of this. Daniel Handler, Lemony Snicket. This is a delightful book. Hardly anyone knows about it, right? It is not in demand, even though it's wonderful. And libraries tend to seek out this stuff more than anything else. And while it's great for us to highlight the things that are sleepers, that are missed, you can't build a collection out of them. In the top right, you got the stuff that's both good and popular, like Harry Potter, right? I mean, it's like libraries had this golden age in the 90s because good and popular actually lined up for a while. That was really nice. Then came this, and good and popular parted ways forever, right? Yes, this is fan fiction. They just took out the pointy teeth and Fair of Light. And then, in the bottom left, you have things like the wonderful blog Awful Library Books. Why does that man have such a big nose? Terrible things that nobody wants, right? Libraries want to avoid this, but of course it finds its way into the collection. This is where you get your 35-year-old teen sexual health books. This is where all that kind of stuff, right? And if you're not following Awful Library Books, you should. It's good for such a cathartic laugh every day. Very helpful. All right. So now let's apply that third axis, the axis of uniqueness. And again, understanding that many of our institutions are struggling to get to this point where we consider unique value in our purchasing decisions. But, okay, so down there on the bottom, you got good and popular, all right? You got not good and popular. If you start looking for things that are slightly more unique, you have good and popular, and you can't get it anywhere else, because if you don't subscribe to HBO, you can't watch Game of Thrones. Right? Game of Thrones is something that is hot, it's in demand, it's good, and you are offering a very valuable service to your patrons when you provide it, because if they don't subscribe to HBO, they can't have it. Now, one caveat, this is a valuable purchasing decision, but never fall into the trap of perching the value of a library on providing free access to things that others have to pay for. We know that that's a big part of the value, but if you say that to a sphere, you're doomed, right? Because they don't care about that. We'll come back to that. So on the other side, you have things that are not good, but still are valuable. And, you are unique. Like that Gilligan's Island isn't on Netflix, folks. If you want to watch Gilligan's Island Season 1, If your library doesn't have it on DVD, people are not going to be able to watch it unless they go and buy it themselves, right? So this can be a core part of your collection, and you can then make the decisions on what the good stuff is and what the not good stuff. Going up even higher in the uniqueness dimension, then you have things that are truly unique to your community. This is an Arcadia book, and Arcadia is kind of a problematic local history publisher if you guys deal with them. But they published a Downtown Ann Arbor book. So for us in Ann Arbor, this was a very valuable thing for us. We want to have lots of copies of this in our collection. Even though our community is probably 95% of the market for this book, we want to have this. On the other side of it is stuff from the 70s, the mysterious deaths of Ann Arbor. There were some co-ed murders back in the 70s. It's kind of a tabloid screed, but nobody's going to care about this more than us and our patrons, right? So we really want to focus on the things that you can't get anywhere else, not the things that are ubiquitous. But going up even higher than that are the things that typically aren't media. And if you come to my session later today, I'll talk about this in more detail. These are Volcas. Volcas are Korg's latest little mini synthesizers. We're circulating a large collection of musical instruments, synthesizers, scopes, music tools, science tools, art tools, all kinds of stuff. Things that are very difficult to access otherwise. We have some things in our music tools collection that are not available at retail anywhere in the United States. Okay? That is a truly unique opportunity. We had a musician who's world famous, who operates out of Detroit, come to our library and borrow some things because he could not buy it. He borrowed it for a week, all right? So that's one end of it. That's popular and extremely unique. You can't get it anywhere else. On the other end of it are things that are extremely unique and you can't get anywhere else but aren't that popular. We circulate resonance bowls, all right? This is a great science tool for understanding standing waves, okay? So you rub the handles just right, and the water jumps out of the bowl, okay? This is a very cool tool, but you gotta kind of want to know about standing waves to use it. So it's not a hugely popular tool, okay? So that's taking the idea of collections and considering uniqueness as a primary value. But what's the next step? What's the fourth dimension? If you go looking for things solely that people will love them, what do you wind up with? Well, here's some projects that we've done. Our music tools collection then wound up with a local musician recording an album using only things he checked out from the library. That's awesome. Unfortunately, he called it Shh, which I could have done without. However, it's cute. It's got a great cover. He's doing a good thing. He's on Kickstarter right now, raising money to finish the album that he already recorded, but he found this as a really fascinating limitation to put on himself creatively, to try to record an album using only synthesizers and tools and electronic music instruments you can check out from the library. That's one example. Another example is synthesizers that really have no musical purpose. This is called an automaton. It's by this insane Japanese company called Maiwa Denki. Now, you can get these on Amazon, but you're not going to find them at retail anywhere in the US. And it's a very fun little silly tool. Here, let me, I think I have a video of it right here. Did I close it? Let me open it, because it's so great. So I'm just going to go to our catalog here. Let me move this over so you can see it. And then I'm going to go to our catalog and search for automaton, because we got a video. All right, so we have both the automaton dual pack and the automaton digital. This is the automaton digital. It's just this very silly little thing. And then where did the rest of the... And we got an incomplete page load, of course. Oh, it's still going. There we go. So, here's what it looks like. Here's the frog song. All right, you get the idea. You can see it is very difficult to come up with a commercial use for these objects. But that's okay. It's all right, because there's so much value in just being able to get that thing that you can't get anywhere else. So an automaton, people love it. We circulate them in sets of 3. They take it home, let their kids play with them, and then they're tired of it and they get to take it back to the library. That's a really great value, to have something that makes noise that then, sorry kids, it's got to go back. Oh, and they say, well, can't you buy one at the store? No, kids, we can't. So here's another example. One of the things that's happening to us in Ann Arbor is, as is happening in many other communities, our news media is disappearing. And as a result, we have a community where a lot of great art stuff is going on all the time. And it used to be that there was an art section of like 16 pages in the newspaper. Now the newspaper itself is only 12 pages and only publishes twice a week. And that's like, that could end any day. So what the library is doing is starting up the community's alt weekly that you've always wanted. So the library is going to become an arts reporter. We're going to commission published articles from the people who used to write for the newspaper, writing about art openings, writing about play preview and reviews, and alongside those professionally produced pieces that the library actually paid a reporter to write with money. This is not something reporters are accustomed to anymore. Alongside that, we're going to welcome contributions from the public, saying, oh, I just saw this great punk show in this dive bar last night. Here's 12 words about it. Great. So a combination of professional and amateur arts writing with something that no newspaper has: moderated comment sections. The library is not afraid to delete garbage from its comment sections. And the only catch is you always want to make it clear what you've done, right? If you ever get to the point, and few libraries are in this situation, where you actually have people commenting on your threads, it is your responsibility to moderate them and keep them safe and be what the web can be instead of what it has become, right? And all you have to do to that is be willing to erase garbage and make a note in the thread that you've erased it. Be open about your actions, but take them. All right, one more example. So our newspaper digitization program, of course, it's really great to be able to digitize newspapers from prior to 1923 because they're in the public domain. You don't have to ask anyone for permission. But that has one type of value. It's fun to see the old ads. But a lot of the great value is actually more recent than that. So there was this crazy paper in Ann Arbor in the 60s and the 70s called the Ann Arbor Sun. It was basically the hippies' paper. And we sought out the original publisher of it and asked him to sign a release allowing us to digitize it. So we've digitized the entire run of the Ann Arbor Sun. This isn't just useful to all of our townies who remember back in the day. It's also useful to scholars of the 60s and the activist movement all over the world. People love these collections. Even if some of these things will never get page views roughly equivalent to the 50 Shades checkouts, people love these extremely intensely, and that changes the library for the good in all directions. So that's collections. All right. So let's talk about events, right? Back in Pointland, the event was that sometime you could go to the library. Sometimes the doors opened and you could go in. And if you weren't a scholar, that was never. But if you were a scholar, you know, on Tuesdays from noon to 2, you could go into the collection and use it. That was the event. When we got to Lineland, we started looking at crap versus not crap, and you had things like, you know, maybe this is a Jane Austen Appreciation Society. We want to do the things that are really good, and this is great. This is still a good library event, right? This is still fun. But we shouldn't mistake it for mass market, right? And it's one big challenge that always happens to libraries is we confuse the niche for the mainstream, right? And again, I'm trying really hard not to rant about ebooks in this talk, but ebooks are a niche. Nowhere is that more clear than in the ebook sales numbers. You know, don't mistake ebooks for the future. That's a whole separate talk. So then when we got to Flatland and we started looking for things that were in demand as well as things that were popular, we found out with a couple different things. For one thing, you had things that were good but not very much in demand, like a book talk, a book group, right? I mean, this is a nice thing for book people to talk about. But number one, every one of those people already has a library card. You're not reaching a new audience with this. Number two, not everybody wants to have this experience. And number three, 6 people isn't always a successful program, right? It may not be worth the time. Not to say that failure is to be avoided, but doing it 6 times and nobody came and you're like, let's change something is one thing. Doing it and 6 people come and you're like, this is great, let's do it for the next 3 years. That's not so good. Then you have things that are both good and popular, like story time. And of course, if you look at clip art, story time is when white ladies read to white children, right? So with story time, this is good and popular, right? And if you're not exclusively limiting the audience by requiring registration or other sorts of nonsense, you probably have hundreds of kids coming to these things. This is huge. These are really great and valuable and popular things. It's a core of library events, right? Then you have things that are popular but not so good, like, say, a Chicagoland Divergent meetup, all right? It's a cool event. People love it, but don't mistake it for something good, right? Right? I mean, it's still Divergent. Then you have things that are terrible and awful. Bats are natural hosts of Ebola, symptoms and how to prevent them. Nobody should have done an Ebola program at their public library, unless it was. But I'm sure somebody out there tried it. So never mistake unpopular and not good for any of the other ones. It's kind of, okay. So now let's move into Spaceland, start evaluating things on whether or not they provide unique value in addition to the crap want axis. Now, a great opportunity here is Minecraft. I'll talk a little bit more about this. Minecraft is so great. It's so great, Microsoft buying it didn't even kill it yet, right? We'll see. Boy, that was a dark day in my house. I was like, kids, I've got some really bad news. And my daughter was like, are they going to kill it like they killed Rareware? And it's like, oh, honey, yeah. So anyway, Minecraft is so great, and while playing Minecraft is not a unique experience, having a safe place to play Minecraft is an extremely unique experience. And being able to offer to the parents of your community, whether you're a school or a public library or even in higher ed, because the kids who grew up on Minecraft are already in college, even in that opportunity, having a Minecraft server that has professionals running it is so rare and so unusual. On our library's Minecraft server, we're building a model of Ann Arbor. One of the best things that parents say about it is, when my kids are on the library's Minecraft server, I don't have to worry about it, because we're watching it. It's very easy to ban someone permanently from a Minecraft server. We log all the comments so we can go back and see. And you get some interesting experiences. Like, we had a kid who kept putting swastikas on the federal building inside the Minecraft world. And we would delete them, and we'd say, kid, you can't do this. And he's like, it wasn't me. And it's like, kid, we're the mods. It was you. This is not debatable. You do it again, and you're out. All right? Never have you seen kids' behavior change so fast as when you threaten them with banning from a Minecraft server. All right? So, another opportunity is Lego. While building with Legos is not a unique opportunity, having their Lego creations judged for skill is a very rare opportunity. We're about to have our 10th annual Lego contest at the library. We get 300 all-age entries, and that's another thing I haven't talked about too much. But make all your events all-age events whenever you can, even in an academic or school environment. Because one thing, and not to get on school libraries too much, but school libraries really struggle with the love, because they're trying so hard to just support the curricular goals, right? But curriculum is inherently bullshit, right? That's a very problematic thing that schools have to deal with. And, it doesn't mean that school libraries can't do things that are just for fun, right? So anyway, Lego is a great opportunity to give kids, for their works to be judged, because a lot of kids and adults only experience competitive success if they happen to win the genetic lottery and be good at sports, right? It's a golden opportunity for libraries to provide for a much wider group of kids the opportunity to experience success in front of their peers. A Lego contest is a good example because it's very unique. But going further, so we have a kids Comic-Con that came and has now been at our library for the past several years. This is a really great thing. Any library can do a Comic-Con. A school library, an academic library, a community college library, any library can do it. It's a lot of work. That's why they call it a job. So you can pull off this event. We actually do a Kids Comics Revolution Awards. Dave Roman and Raina Telgemeier put this together. We pass out ballots at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and we get ballots from all over the world of kids saying what their favorite graphic novels are. And then we have an award ceremony at Kids Read Comics with puppets and crazy bands and all kinds of stuff to award the best comics. And this has started to matter a lot to the cartoonists in the kids' comic space. Another example is Tiny Expo. This is a craft show in Ann Arbor that was losing its home. So we approached them and said, well, you could have it at the library. We wouldn't even charge you. We'd even rent tables. We'd even feed you. And they were like, what? So we had 3,000 people at the library in one day for this craft show. It is our highest door count of any single day ever, all right? Now, the catch is craft shows are really at their best in early December. So you want to do it in early December. But there's no reason that you, and we didn't do this in our program room. We did it on the first floor. We took bookshelves down to make room for this. We put them back up afterwards. But we used the space we had. We used the resources we had to make this experience happen. What's it got to do with books? Nothing. Jack shit, right? What it does have is value for the people of the community, value for the artists who are getting to exhibit their work, value for the library goers who are like, oh, I never knew about this, and value for the shoppers who are going to Tiny Expo and actually had a good experience instead of being crammed in someone's basement. All right? So, again, there's nothing stopping you from doing things like this. Another example, you could buy some Angry Birds books. You could buy some Angry Birds movies. We just did live action Angry Birds at a gym. This was huge. They're not going to get this experience anywhere else in their lives. Although a bunch of them then went home and tried to set it up themselves, right? This is a great experience, live action Angry Birds. One other example is when there's outdoor festivals, we distribute little flashlights that project our logo. Suddenly, the entire event is AADL branded. These are unique opportunities, unique experiences, all right? We haven't even gotten to the love yet. This is just taking the crap want axis and applying uniqueness to it. So now, where's the love? Well, there's this great organization called Nerd Night, all right? They do events all over the world, all right? It's a very distributed sort of thing. It's like you sign up to be a chapter. It's kind of like ALA, only it's functional and moves forward. So, sorry, couldn't resist. So Nerd Night, there's lots of communities hosting Nerd Night events. The one in our town was, again, kind of struggling. They were fronting the money to rent a bar. We said, we'll rent the bar. We can help this happen. But in return, you make it no cover. And they were like, okay. So now this has become a huge thing. We do it once a month. It's at a bar, and local speakers speak for 20 minutes about whatever it is that they're into. Our most recent one was eyeballs, turntables, and cartoons. We had someone from the medical school talk about ophthalmology. We had someone talk about being a DJ, and we had someone talk about how 80s cartoons are the foundation of most modern thought. So this was a very great event. This thing is packed. None of those people have library cards. That is hugely valuable. What does it cost the library? About $200. Okay, this is not an expensive, complex program. And for the bar, they just made a new night where they make money. They didn't have that before. It's a win-win-win for everyone all involved. Then, here's a good example. Back to the Future Day is coming up. The day that they travel forward to is October 25th, 2015. What are you doing at your library to commemorate this once in an entire human history event? We're doing an Enchantment Under the Sea dance. All right? Why not? This is media. You've got this in your collection. Okay? Back to the Future is foundational pop culture for any library, okay? This event is only going to come along once in life. And now we actually have hoverboards. You got to use them on specially prepared surfaces, but, there's so much stuff going on. Like Nike is releasing the crazy talking shoes. All the thing is happening. And this is a great opportunity for you to harness a new audience and give them something that they really love, an experience that they'll never forget. Here's another example. Yuri's Night is an international celebration of space travel commemorating the first human in space, Yuri Gagarin. Happens April 12th or April 13th, depending on where GMT falls, if I remember right, every year. This is a great thing for a library to host. We're planning a dance party, basically. There's no reason not to. This is space travel. This is important stuff. And this is also a launching off point where we're creating a program we call a Launch Club. And every time there's a launch that happens during business hours, we're going to show it on one of the screens in the library and invite the community to come watch that launch together. It doesn't have to be a manned launch. Just any rocket launch is fun to watch because it could blow up, right? And if you don't watch it, it's more likely it's going to blow up, right? So this is super fun, and we're going to give out codes for the people who watch the game so they can get badges for them. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, one other thing. So here's where we're going with the love extra far. We're going to do a drunk spelling bee at a bar. Okay? This is an emerging thing. Communities are doing this. It's super fun. And hey, it's spelling, right? So it doesn't need to go any further than that. People love this, and it gives them such a good feeling about their library. One other thing, taking Minecraft and adding the love. So last year for the International Minecraft Hunger Games, our library hosted an international Minecraft Hunger Games tournament. We first had the finals in Australia, then we had the finals in Europe, and then the winners of the Australian and the European finals played against the U.S. winners. We had 59 libraries across the U.S. playing online. We provided the servers. Just to give an example, that cost us, the entire project cost us about $55 because Amazon Web Services is scaled for real web services like Twitter and things like that. And for something cheap like Minecraft, you pay for it in it's like 11 cents an hour to operate a Minecraft server. Now, you got to have some expertise, but the actual costs of it are very low. So the International Minecraft Hunger Games was huge, and the winner was a 13-year-old girl from Providence, Rhode Island. She beat the hardcore German guys. She beat the foul-talking Australians. She defeated them all, and she survived hunger, and it was great. The Hunger Games is a super great mod for Minecraft, and people are really into that, and it's very fun. So that's adding love to events. So let's just talk quickly about summer reading. We're coming close to the polemic part. We haven't made it to the polemic part. So back in Pointland, summer reading was really easy because kids were not allowed in the library, right? No kids, no library. They're not bringing their sticky lollipops in there. Now, does anyone know what the symbol is? This is the emerging no kids movement symbol, okay? Bars are putting this on their door because Greenpoint hipsters bring their children to bars at 11 p.m., right? And rather than saying go home, they're just putting this sticker on the front door. So this is the no kids bar movement thing. We don't want to see this at libraries, obviously. Then in Lineland, you really kind of had one thing, the summer reading list. We're going to tell you what's good to read this summer. What bullshit is that? To be prescriptive about what people read when they're out of school? Are you kidding me? What a good way to throw away any goodwill that the library has accrued is to say, what you're reading isn't good enough. You should be reading this. These are things you should read. And this is the type of stuff that was in it. Now, I'm kind of cherry picking because this is a teacher's publisher. But man, how many teachers are actually reading during their summer? Essential questions, textbook fatigue, these kinds of things. Come on, they're reading 50 Shades. So, when we move into Flatland, okay, on the bottom right corner, things that are good for you but not very popular, you have the reading log, right? Some kids really like to track their reading. Those kids are going to be lifelong library users no matter what we do, right? Now, on the other side is homework. You don't want your summer reading program to be homework because not only does no one like homework is bad for children, right? Pedagogy is starting to get there, finally, saying that homework is bad for children, right? Then, on things that everybody likes that are super possible, at your end of your summer game thing, you probably have a bounce house, right? What's that got to do with libraries? Nothing. It's okay. They can come bounce around. It's fun. No worries. But with bounce houses come sometimes things that there's demand for, but they're actually terrible. And I'm talking about clowns, all right? Don't let clowns into your summer reading program, all right? You don't want the clown's negative image to get on your program, all right? Just say no to clowns. All right, so, but now we're going to start talking about adding unique value because, of course, the kids who are doing summer reading are going to do summer reading no matter what, right? They're going to be reading because their parents are going to make them, or they're book kids, and you can't stop them from reading. And one major thing that we heard was that our summer reading log that had 10 spaces in it was making the book kids feel devalued because they read 10 books a week, especially when you're talking about kids' books, right? They're going to read 10 picture books before bed one night, So, we took the foundation of the reading log and then added to it things that you can't get anywhere else. Essentially, an online game with points and badges and activity. So, Mega Review Master is a badge you get for writing reviews on our website. I've seen this in my own house. Day 1 of summer, my daughter is writing reviews of her favorite books for points, right? And things that kids choose to do are always going to be far more valuable to them than that which they are assigned to do. We didn't say you have to write reviews. We say if you do, this is what you'll get. All right? On the other side, you have badges for visiting parks. We give you codes, and you get the codes by going around the park and finding things on markers and benches and trees and things like that. So we had hundreds of people visiting city parks all summer long. Then you go really far with pop culture. This is a Plants vs. Zom badge. This follows zombies through the catalog and solves puzzles, and you get points for it. On the other end, we had For Heaven's Snake. This was our celestial constellations badge. So you get badges for finding things in the catalog that relate to constellations. And then we also have badges that promote our own events. This was the Kids Read Comics convention badge where you got if you went to a certain number of events. All right? So that's adding unique value they can't get anywhere else. So where's the love? If you take that to the next level, you take this mechanism that we've discovered that's so effective in motivating kids, you can get a lot of great stuff. So for example, we have a game where players, kids, adults, whoever, will correct the OCR on our historic newspapers for free. And they get points for it. And that's that. So they get a badge, they get points, it costs us nothing. It's great. We have Streets Quest, which then we're partners with the Historical Society. They have these markers all around town. We have a puzzle that guides people around. It's the walking tour they always wanted, only people actually want to do it. So it's a very fun thing, and people are really into it. Now we've just launched Download of the Day, which is every day we highlight a new download from our collection. Now this is not through Overdrive. These are direct DRM-free downloads that we've licensed directly. I'll talk about that more in the session later. But to pair with Download of the Day, you get points for downloading the Download of the Day. The first person to download it gets 1,000 points. The second person to download it gets 999 points, and so on. We stole that from Ready Player One. So if you take that idea, then a week before, you get the lowdown of the day, which is a puzzle that gives you a clue about what the download of the day might be. So you have a week to solve the puzzle, and if you solve it before we tell you what the download of the day is, you get an extra 500 points. What can you do with those points? Nothing. It's just fun, and people love it. They are really into it. They just love it. And then, while we did make a night challenge proposal for the library one that wasn't successful, we've also partnered with a local organization called Civ City Initiative to make a game that is all about civic engagement. We dipped our toe in this last summer where there was a badge where you could get points for speaking to the library board. And we had 9-year-olds coming to the library board meeting and making public comments, right? We also gave out points for helping this local paper collect the canvass reports from the August election. So we had families going to their polling place to copy down the stuff off the tape before it was even reported to the county. Right? This is great stuff. So, in conjunction with the Civ City Initiative, we're using our infrastructure to build a game that encourages civic engagement across all fronts. You get points for taking a selfie with you and your elected official, you get points for visiting a park, all kinds of stuff. All right. So we got just a few minutes left. I want to rush through this. This is really quick. Now about messaging, not marketing. We shouldn't talk about marketing in libraries because libraries exist outside the market. All right? It's messaging. It's conveying your message. It's one of the hardest things for libraries to do because, frankly, we can't afford the people who are really good at this, right? What we have are the people who really love libraries. Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not so good. If your message involves the word books, it's going to be really tough, right? That just reinforces the, frankly, mostly boomer opinion that libraries have been outmoded by ebooks, right? That is not a millennial opinion. First of all, millennials don't give a shit about ebooks, all right? It's a boomer opinion because, not to pick, but, you know, when the boomers are done with things, it should be destroyed. That's the plan, right? So, this was the message back in Pointland days. This is where the books are kept. That's all you need to know about the library. In Lineland days, it changed to this is where the good books are kept. This is where you get that read responsibly crap, right? It's kind of problematic. Now, when you get to Flatland, you have 4 different messages. Good books everybody likes. Bad books everybody likes. Good books nobody likes. And bad books nobody likes, right? It's still a book-heavy message. Believe me, there's no one in your community who is not aware that your library has books, right? Don't spend $1 trying to tell them that. If you have turning pages in your logo, it might be time for a new logo, right? It's tough. Okay, in Spaceland, we take that uniqueness dimension, and our message becomes something like this. You can get things and do things at your library that you can't get anywhere else. Not, hey, that thing you saw at Amazon, we have it too. But we offer you things you cannot get anywhere else, true unique value. But you add the love into it, you move into the 4th dimension, and the message is simply, love your library. It is what you make of it. So many of the things that we've done have not been because we took a survey, but because someone came up to the desk and said, do you have this? Oh, it'd be really awesome if you had that, right? And they were like, oh, that would be awesome. Let's have those. Okay, so with that said, here's the secret power of love as the 4th dimension, okay? We do have our natural enemy in libraries, and it is the sphere. And we're going to put a little hat on him so we kind of make it very clear what kind of nature the sphere is. It's a higher order being. Now, you can view this isn't usually library administration. Usually library administration is not operating from a slash and burn profiteering perspective. They're usually operating from a change anxiety perspective, right? They're just anxious. They're just scared, right? And that is where you run into a lot of your problems internally. But externally, whether it's school administration or campus administration or county or city administration, you'll run into people who have a particular form of government in mind, and that form of government is as little government as possible, right? And when you run into that, it's very difficult to communicate with them on our terms, and libraries tend to fall into a trap, the trap of believing that we can change their mind with stats, right? There's a couple problems with that. One thing is, All the stats showing that school librarians are good for kids hasn't done a single thing to save the school librarian. Not a thing, right? It's not helping. They're not listening. The other part is stats are so easily manipulated, right? So you need to use that for you instead of just publishing it all out there and letting someone else tell you, oh, your door count went down 0.2% over the past 5 years. Clearly, libraries are doomed, right? We need to avoid that situation because Mr. Sphere only has one way of looking at the world, right? Up, 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 growth, growth, growth. Eat, 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 right? This is problematic because it makes it too likely that he'll view the library as you're down there at the bottom of the growth curve and I'm way up here, all right? The other part of this, let me come back to this one for just a minute, is, this is where you get people saying with a straight face things that are basically, nobody goes to libraries anymore, they're too crowded, right? Yogi Berra, yes, yeah. All right, so the other part of this is that if you rely too heavily on stats, and when we're talking about dimensions, the sphere wants all stats to point up, right? That's change over time. That's a vector. Vectors are tricky because they're hard to see. For example, if you attempt to tell if a pot of water is boiling only by measuring the temperature, during the time that it's boiling, you'll see no change in temperature. Even though if you look at it with your eyes, you see so much activity and so much stuff is happening, the temperature is the same because it's undergoing a phase change. Right? This is a big deal for libraries right now because CIRC might be going down. In a lot of places, CIRC is going down. And if that's the only stat we're reporting, and we've been diligently reporting it for years and years and years, we've just handed the opposition a tool that they can use against us. Never mind that the quality of those CIRCs might be going up, or that the library is busier, or any one of these kinds of things. All that matters to them is, look, it's going down. Down is bad, bad down, library bad, right? Because if you look at that phase change over time, the transition from print to digital use, and while leaving aside ebooks, because ebooks remain a very small part of the market, leaving aside ebooks, the amount of people using computers at your library, the amount of people visiting your library's website, the amount of people using your library's digital services, that can be increasing as CIRC is decreasing, which makes it look flat if you combine those the way that the IMLS stats want you to, right? At best, it's flat. But in reality, the two parts of that phase change are apples and oranges. Well, guess what? The sphere has hereditary male color blindness. He can't tell the difference between apples and oranges, right? All this comes to is this message. You cannot measure your way out of a political problem, all right? There's not a solution to political challenges from the outside that stats will solve. Now, one exception to this, we talked about vectors being bad, change over time. Scalars, which is just a measurement, just a raw measurement, can be very impressive if they're deployed strategically. For example, one thing that totally changed things for our library is just saying what the door count was and putting it in terms people could understand. For example, we say the downtown library gets about as many visits on an annual basis as Michigan Stadium. Now, granted, Michigan Stadium's only open 7 days a year, but still, that's something people can wrap their heads around, okay? We have 650,000 visits to the downtown library. All right? We're not saying over time. Because if you look at it over time, like most libraries, our recession bump is trailing off, right? Got a big bump in 2008 because people had no choice, right? That's trailing off a little bit. So if people are cherry picking your data from 2010 to 2014, they're going to say, oh, that trend's pointing down, you're done. But if you just say, this is how many people. The other thing is to make those scalar comparisons across longer time spans. Libraries don't operate on the business cycle. We don't do business quarterly. We do it by decade, right? So I challenge you to find a library that's doing worse now than 10 years ago. So you can compare that and make a very strong point. Because the only thing that's going to get Mr. Sphere's attention is bad news, stuff that gets in his way, right? And part of that is creating an uproar. You only get an uproar with love. And an uproar is worth 1,000 annual reports, right? And if people love your library, when it's needed, they're going to rally around it. Right? But they have to love it first. And the more people that love your library, the more that you'll have, the more resources you'll have available when things get tough. Because libraries command love unequaled in civic society. Do people love even Parks and Rec the way they love libraries? No. They certainly don't love the city hall, certainly don't love the county government, they probably don't love police or fire the way they love libraries. As much as they might say, I'd rather have police or fire than libraries, it doesn't mean that they love them. right? They love their library. And one thing that's very big is that libraries can provide service to a much broader audience at no additional cost. You know, one thing is, never describe, especially for public libraries, never call your library free. There ain't a damn thing free about the public library. The only thing about the public library is you already paid. And you have to be on message about that every moment. Every time someone says a tweet that's like, look what I got the library for free, we always respond and say, that's not free, you already paid. Every time, right? Don't let that go by without being remarked. So, we command this love. Use it, and don't lose it. Love is fickle. You can lose it with the wrong move, right? You can make things so, you know, like, for example, the libraries that decided just to close rather than allowing teens in from 3 to 5 p.m., right? It's a good way to throw away a generation. That's problematic. The other thing is, libraries, even school libraries, while there's so much pressure on the schools to meet these arbitrary metrics, the reality is that school libraries have a great opportunity to embrace kids with what they actually love. And that doesn't mean telling them the books are too hard for them. It drives me crazy when school libraries tell kids that book's not for you, it's too hard, right? It's nuts. Okay, one last point. Love is a quantum state. Okay, now that's literally true because of the quantum effects in our neurons, but it's also true in that quantum measurements affect the outcome. If you attempt to gauge the love of your community, you're going to diminish the love of your community. You can't ask them how much they love you without changing it. It's true in relationships too, right? So this is not something you can measure. It's something you can use, that you can harness, that you can nurture. But most importantly, don't mistake the values of grant makers and political liberty gibbets for what actually matters. Just because it's important to a foundation, to the county, to the city, doesn't mean it's really important. You might have to pay lip service, but don't lose sight of your mission along the way, which means don't let anyone tell you what your library is. And conversely, don't let anyone tell you what your library is not, right? It's for you to create. It's for you to make, and it can go in any direction. And all you have to do is do things that people love. That's all there is to it, you know, and not tell yourself you can't do that because it's not X, Y, or Z. Because Spear's going to be going along. He wants to go about his business. That's all he wants to do is go about his business. We can crush him with love. We can smash him and show him that the libraries command a powerful, you know, if you're following the news, while it wasn't exclusively love-based, Kentucky just had really good news in their Tea Party attack on the very nature of library funding. The courts just said, no, this is legit. Libraries get to exist, right? It's a big point. It's a turning point. So that's the basics of my talk. We'll take questions here in just a minute, but I want to end with the closing line of Flatland. Yet I exist in hope that these memoirs, in some manner, I know not how, may find their way to the minds of humanity in some dimension, and may stir up a race of rebels who shall refuse to be confined to limited dimensionality. Thank you very much. Oops. So we have just a few minutes for questions, if anyone has any questions. I'll start with an icebreaker question because this usually has to happen. I'll ask the question that people usually want to ask myself. How do you get the money to do all these things? All right? The answer is surprising. We are not a luxuriously funded library. We are definitely a well-funded library. But there are libraries in the U.S. that have more than twice as much money per capita as we do. We are distinctly middle of the pack in terms of our funding level. What we've just chosen to do is use our resources wisely and not say we have to keep doing this. We've cut some databases that nobody ever used, right? We've decreased some collection. You know, that money for the tools collection came from somewhere. You know, it came from other material collection budgets. Yeah, Andy.
At some point, you had a traditional AADL, and at some point, somebody flipped the switch. And it can't just be you.
No,
there was a whole lawn of...
It was actually a director who became director in it. Well, actually, before her, we used to be part of the schools. That in Michigan, there were libraries that were public libraries that were operated by the school systems in each area. Then there was a state law passing that schools can't do this anymore. So we had to go to the public to get a dedicated property tax millage to fund the library. This was in 1995. It passed, and that was kind of the start of it. But we really started changing with our director, Josie Parker, who became director in 2002. And basically, one of the first things she did was remove limits on requests, renewals, and checkouts. That's the simplest thing ever, easiest thing ever. Boy, do people love it. Sure, you're going to have a few people who have 600 things checked out. So You don't write policies for them. So it was really that turning point, and Josie's slogan is get to the S, establish a culture of generosity. And that's really just spread through the whole organization, saying, what can we do for you? Nobody in our organization is there to protect the books, especially. I mean, a lot of library policies are set up to protect the books from use, right? That's not what we're doing. So it was a cultural change that started from the top down, but it was also at the same time coming up from the bottom as people were seeing opportunities to solve things that bothered them every day. You know, everybody on a desk knows those moments where it's like, oh God, I have to say this again, and this is such bullshit, whatever it is. It's those moments to look for opportunities to change. Does that answer your question, Andy? Other questions? Dave?
Would it be fair to say one of the unique things and the love things you have are the community itself? In other words, one of the questions is, does Ann Arbor District Library, even a branch of Ann Arbor District Library, have to look like every other branch? Does it have to do the same things? Where is the economy of scale that libraries for so long have been working on?
Yeah. I mean, there are some unique aspects about our community, but every community has those aspects. I think the issue is we definitely have not prized consistency across all other values. Consistency of service quality, yes. Consistency of collection or organization or things like that. We have things that are shelved at different locations in different buildings because that's unique to those audiences. A lot of libraries, the management level is like, no, can't do that. It's got to be the same. Having each building be able to be somewhat autonomous, not from a management perspective, but in terms of reacting to its audience, is a very big utility for meeting. Now, it is a small community geographically. You know, I mean, there's not very spread out. It's fairly dense, which means there's not a lot of difference in the audiences that each branch serves. And one of the things we found is almost all of the people in our community visit the downtown library at some point during the year, you know. So we definitely have that part of it. And it is, you know, it is a well-educated community, but most of the well-educated parts of that community have access to this enormous and powerful university library system. And they don't even need us necessarily, because even the university library has the fiction that they want to read. So in many cases, it's just a matter of us reaching out to reach as many households as we can. In our latest survey, we found that 78% of households are using the library. So we're pretty pleased with that.
One other question, which I get not put quite so poetically, but I just can't resist. How do you decide to support Nerd Night and not high-end prostitutes?
What?
Not support high-end prostitutes.
Right. Well, it's very easy because Nerd Night is people talking about information, right? It's very easy to take a very broad brush and say, this is something that people would really love that also fits into our mission. You know, and our mission is fairly broad in that we want to guarantee public access to and ownership of information across all formats, all right? That plays right in to something like Nerd Night, but you can't say that prostitutes and pie are an information resource that is well. And really, you know, it's like when we talk about what can we do about the only thing that we really draw a line around is food service. You know, food service is about the only thing. It's like if we're going to have a cafe, we're going to have someone else operate it. You know, food service is probably outside of it. Yes?
Sandy. I have a question from South Carolina.
Yes.
How do you get governing bodies to approve reallocation of funds?
That's tricky. They shouldn't have had that opportunity in the first place, and that's an easy thing for me to say. But the library's budget should be a line item, and it shouldn't be the governing body about that. And part of it is, you know, changes of, you know, it's a rare library board that says this much on DVDs and this much on books and this much on this, and that's because it's being presented to them with that amount of detail. The governing boards should see a very succinct budget. If your budget doesn't fit on one page, you're giving your governing body too much detail. Now, that's a hard thing to change going forward. That is super hard to change. But culturally, it's to find the allies and move forward on that. Because the challenge is, then you get trapped in a previous generation's vision of what the library is. Because, you know, those types of bodies skew older than the general population. And that can be very problematic. So it's hard to get there. But in many cases, you can start those things off with soft money, with a grant or something like it, and then say, this was so successful, we're moving it in. But in many cases, there's like Trojan horses, like telescopes. It's really hard for a governing body to say that the public library should not be circulating telescopes. Some of them are going to try, but it is undeniably a learning tool that is rare and very valuable to the community. So I think it's about finding the right wedges to pry the door open a little bit and get people comfortable with it. But in general, I think the issue is to boil that stuff down and have a collections budget. And that's the budget. That's that. And to break it down too much is inviting trouble. I hope that helps. Yes. Oh, back there.
How did you get buy-in from staff and board members? This is very high-level concepts.
Yep.
There's a lot of people in our community that look at us as, oh, that's the book warehouse.
Right. Well, and basically we just had the entire organization realizes that we're not moving away from the book, right? We'll have books as long as people are coming to check them out. And I expect that to be decades, if not centuries. But for the staff to realize, I mean, sometimes it's like you have to do it anyway, and then the staff that is reluctant will see how well it works. 10 years ago, when we bought, Nintendo GameCubes to do Mario Kart tournaments, there were members of the reference staff who were like, this is the end of the library. But once we made them come and see what was going on in there, they're like, oh, I get it. This is fine. And besides, all those GameCubes cost together, all that initial was like less than the cost of one copy of books in print. So it's all relative when it comes to that. So it's really about moving forward. Now, from our board perspective, it's definitely a forgiveness rather than permission. But our board has always been very good because they're an elected board, not an appointed board. They are responsive to the community, which means that they have to let things happen. And they're happy to let things happen and see the results. Gwen?
Please repeat the question.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Are created to restrict or limit the use of library materials. For example, checkout limits, renewal limits. Why?
Why are library policies created to limit library materials? Because policy is anxiety avoidance. That's what policy is for, is to avoid anxiety, right? The problem is you need to be really discerning about what you choose to be anxious about. And when you make policies about you can only check out this many things, you can only renew this many times, that kind of thing, the anxiety that you have is you're anxious that people might use the library too much. That's a success condition, not a failure condition. It's not so different from the questions we used to get when we started doing gaming events or a Minecraft event, where people would say, oh, that sounds really fun, but what happens if 60 boys show up? Well, then it worked. That's great. That's success. Now, and the ILEAD crowd is not one that's likely to be afraid of success. You're more likely to run into that with your partners and peers in the organization. Well, just keep going. Just keep going. And especially, shininess helps. The whole maker movement, and just not to digress too much, but it's a terrible word and it's a terrible name for a very important thing. Maker is inherently identity politics, and I can't stand that word because it makes people self-identify as either I'm a maker or not. It's as if libraries call themselves reader places, right? That's bad. Anyway, and 3D printers will be very valuable to libraries until they're ubiquitous, at which point they'll stop being useful at all. So that's not a big deal for libraries. But I think that knowing when to invest strategically is a very big deal. Okay, Sam, what?
I'm going to cut you off because, one, we're getting questions online, which we can hopefully respond to via Twitter. I want to look at the time. I would like to first just take a moment to thank Eli for an amazing talk. And I hope what you're seeing here and what I hope you're seeing online is that there are lots of different modes of presenting and demonstrating passion, demonstrating a willingness to succeed, a willingness to try new things, and I hope that we're showing you modeling. Eli is a model of folks who say, we want to succeed and we're not afraid of success. I want to, at this time, tell our folks streaming from other states that we are now done with this session, and to invite you all here to begin working on your groups, and we need to be back in our seats at noon for the secretary.
10 till.
10 till.
10 till, okay?
10 till. So, thank you online, thank you in here, thank you Eli, let's go change the world.